Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where medieval soldiers feared far more than swords. Beyond the legends and heroic tales were weapons so terrifying that even seasoned warriors whispered about them around smoky hearthfires. Imagine standing in the freezing dark, hearing the hiss of arrows overhead, the crack of a crossbow string, or the distant thunder of an early cannon rolling across the hills. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these relaxing journeys through history. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there tonight. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let's discover the terrifying weapons medieval soldiers feared most. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the looming gate of a medieval town as winter dusk settles across the land like a wool blanket damp from river mist. Cold stone presses close on either side. Mud clings stubbornly to your boots. Smoke drifts from dozens of hearths and disappears into soot-dark rafters hidden beyond shuttered windows. Somewhere in the distance, monastery bells mark the passing hour with patient certainty. Horse breath hangs white in the air. Torchlight flickers along wet walls and turns every puddle into molten gold. A cartwheel groans nearby. A dog noses through straw. The scent of wood smoke, damp hay, and cabbage pottage lingers over everything. The gate guards barely glance your way. They have spent all day watching travellers arrive, and by now their enthusiasm for new faces has frozen solid. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You shift your shoulders against the cold and glance toward the darkening streets. Already, you can feel that life here moves according to bells, seasons, weather, and worries very different from your own. In truth, you probably would not last a week out here before complaining about the bedding, the food, the weather, or all three simultaneously. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, feel free to comment your location and local time as you listen tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step beneath the gate arch and enter the town. The streets are narrow, winding between timber-framed houses whose upper stories lean so close together they almost seem eager to exchange secrets. Water drips from eaves. Rushes cover stone floors visible through open doorways. Candles burn behind horn-covered windows. The dog that greeted you at the gate decides, for reasons known only to dogs, that you now belong to him. He follows at a respectful distance. Ahead, a market square slowly empties as merchants pack away goods before darkness fully arrives. A fish seller folds a cloth over smoked herring. A cooper secures barrels with practiced hands. A woman carrying firewood disappears into an alley. You wander toward the warmth of an alehouse. Inside, the room glows with beeswax candles and firelight. The ceiling beams are blackened by generations of smoke. Wet cloaks hang from pegs near the entrance. Men and women warm stiff fingers around cups of ale. A serving girl places a trencher of coarse bread near the hearth. Nearby, someone stirs a pot of pottage thick with onions and barley. You find a place close enough to the fire to feel its warmth, but not so close that your boots begin steaming. That is when you first hear the conversation. Not loud boasting, not heroic songs. Something quieter, something more honest. A group of soldiers sits around a rough oak table. Their mail shirts glint softly beneath cloaks. Their faces carry the weathered look of men who have spent more time outdoors than indoors. One of them speaks. Everyone asks what weapon I'd rather carry. Another nods. No one asked what weapon I'd rather face. A murmur follows. The room grows slightly quieter. You lean closer. The oldest soldier rubs scarred knuckles against his cup. The worst ones aren't always the biggest. Several heads nod. Outside, wind rattles shutters. Inside, the fire crackles. The old soldier continues. When you're young, you fear great swords. That's what stories tell you to fear. He shrugs. Then you spend enough winters on campaign and learn different lessons. No one laughs. No one argues. You begin to understand that fear in the medieval world rarely resembles the fear described in songs. Songs celebrate glory. Reality worries about surviving until breakfast. A bell rings somewhere beyond the town walls. The soldiers pause briefly, almost unconsciously marking time. Throughout the medieval world, bells govern life. They announce prayers, meals, warnings, curfews, weddings, funerals, and market openings. Even now, people sometimes claim they can tell the health of a town merely by listening to its bells. Some swear that a cracked bell foretells misfortune. Others insist that saints protect settlements whose bells ring clearly through winter fog. No one can quite agree whether either belief is true. Still, many prefer not to test the matter. The conversation returns to weapons. Not specific weapons yet, only fear itself. One soldier stares into the fire. You hear a story about a weapon before you ever see it. The others nod. And by the time you finally face it, the story has grown larger than the thing. Outside, snow begins falling in small drifting flakes. You watch them dance past the doorway. The old soldier lifts his cup. The weapon that frightens you most tonight may not be the one that frightens you tomorrow. A younger man laughs softly. That's comforting. It shouldn't be. The table erupts in tired chuckles. Even fear, it seems, appreciates company. Hours pass. The alehouse grows quieter. Travellers settle into corners. A merchant counts coins. An ink-stained scribe reviews notes by candlelight, squinting as though the letters have personally offended him. The dog finally curls near the hearth. You share bread with a pilgrim wearing a weathered badge pinned to his cloak. The badge depicts a saint whose relics supposedly cure fevers. Whether they actually do remains uncertain. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The pilgrim swears he once saw a blind man regain sight after touching the shrine. Another traveller insists the miracle involved a lame mule instead. A third claims both stories concern entirely different saints. The medieval world is wonderfully consistent in its inconsistency. As darkness deepens, you eventually leave the alehouse. The streets are quieter now. Snow gathers along rooftops. Torchlight burns beside doorways. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith secures heavy iron keys before closing his workshop. You pass a roadside shrine built into a wall niche. A tiny candle burns before a painted saint. Beyond the houses, watchfires glow along the town defences. The guards atop the walls appear as silhouettes against the night sky. You climb a narrow stair to the gatehouse. From there, the town stretches beneath you. Chimneys release thin threads of smoke. Lanterns flicker. The distant monastery bell sounds once more. The guard standing nearby pulls his fur-lined cloak tighter. You ask what troubles soldiers most these days. He looks across the frozen fields. For a moment he says nothing. Then he answers, "Depends where you're marching." A pause follows. The roads is usually. You smile. The answer surprises you. "It should not," he says. Then he gestures toward the darkness beyond the walls. Out there lie forests, muddy roads, rivers, battlefields, and long journeys. Out there wait the weapons whose names drift through every tavern, monastery guest house, manor hall, and watchtower. Weapons that become stories. Stories that become warnings. Warnings that travel farther than armies. The guard watches the distant road. Sooner or later, he says quietly, you hear about all of them. Snow settles softly upon the stones. The town sleeps. And beyond the walls, hidden somewhere in the winter darkness, waits the first of those feared weapons. Morning arrives slowly, not with a burst of sunlight, but with a pale grey glow creeping across the eastern horizon, while frost clings stubbornly to every rooftop, fence post, and cartwheel in sight. You wake in the gatehouse loft wrapped in a wool blanket that has clearly lived several previous lives. It smells faintly of smoke, damp wood, and perhaps a sheep that still refuses to move on emotionally. Below, the town is already stirring. A bell rings from the monastery beyond the river. Another answers from within the walls. The familiar dog from yesterday appears at the bottom of the stair, stretching dramatically as though he personally carried the burden of guarding the town all night. You descend into the crisp air. Market workers are sweeping yesterday's straw from the square. A baker carries fresh loaves beneath a cloth. Thin streams of chimney smoke rise into the morning sky. The guard who spoke with you last night stands near the gate. He nods toward a road leading across open farmland. You wanted to hear about feared weapons. You follow his gaze, then walk with them. A small group of soldiers is preparing to leave town. Nothing about them appears particularly dramatic. No gleaming heroes. No colourful banners. Just practical men wrapped in cloaks, stamping warmth into cold feet. You join them as they head out through the gate. The countryside unfolds beneath the pale winter sun. Fields lie dormant beneath frost. Stone walls divide pastures. Crows hop through stubbled farmland searching for forgotten grain. The road itself is little more than a muddy scar across the landscape. Before long, one of the soldiers begins speaking. You've heard of swords. You nod. Everyone has. The man smiles, then forgets swords for a while. The others chuckle. They continue walking. Soon you crest a low rise overlooking a broad field. There, dozens of men are training. At first glance, the scene seems strange. The soldiers carry long wooden poles. Very long poles, far longer than any spear you might imagine. Some stretch well beyond 15 feet. The shafts sway slightly as men march in formation. And suddenly you understand. The pike, the weapon that appears almost absurd until you see hundreds of them together. The morning wind moves through the formation. Ash wood shafts creak softly. Iron heads glimmer beneath weak sunlight. The soldiers beside you stop to watch. One scratches his beard. That, he says, is a nightmare for horses. You study the formation. Rows upon rows of pikes point forward like the branches of a frozen forest. The men carrying them move slowly but steadily. Each depends on those beside him. Alone, a pikeman might seem vulnerable. Together, they become something entirely different. A living wall, a moving hedge of sharpened iron. The captain overseeing the drill shouts commands. The formation adjusts. Pikes lower in unison. Hundreds of points angle toward an imaginary enemy. The effect is unsettling. Even from a distance, you find yourself imagining what it must feel like to ride toward such a thing. Apparently many medieval horses felt exactly the same way. Animals possess their own opinions. Some opinions are stronger than military doctrine. A horse can be brave. A horse can be loyal. A horse can also decide that charging into a forest made entirely of sharp objects is an exceptionally poor idea. Many do. The soldiers nearby seem to appreciate this reality. One laughs quietly. The horse usually understands before the rider does. You continue watching. The pikes rise. The pikes lower. Again, Again, again. Repetition dominates the morning. That is the secret. The weapon itself matters. The discipline matters more. A pike formation succeeds because every man trusts the men beside him, or at least distrusts them slightly less than the enemy. A cold breeze sweeps across the field. You pull your cloak tighter. The drill continues. Nearby, a wagon carries bundles of spare shafts. Carpenters inspect damaged poles. Camp followers prepare simple meals over portable fires. Even weapons require constant maintenance, especially wooden ones. One elderly veteran sits on a barrel watching younger men train. His left hand bears old scars. His eyes follow the formation carefully. You sit beside him. Why fear pikes so much, you ask. He takes a moment before answering. Because medieval answers often arrive slowly. They don't look frightening. He points toward the field. That's why. You wait. A sword looks dangerous. He shrugs. A pike looks like wood. Another pause, until 600 of them start moving. The veteran watches the formation advance. For a moment, only wind and distant commands fill the air. Then he adds quietly, "You don't fight one pike. You fight all of them." The statement lingers. Simple, true, difficult to argue with. Beyond the field stands a roadside shrine dedicated to a local saint. A few soldiers stop there before training. One ties a ribbon to a branch. Another touches a carved image for luck. Some swear certain saints protect travellers from arrows. Others prefer saints who specialize in horses. Still others trust neither and carry lucky stones instead. No one can quite agree which method works best. Most hedge their bets and try all of them. The medieval approach to risk management is surprisingly comprehensive. As midday approaches, food arrives. Coarse bread, cheese, smoked fish, all diluted with water. The soldiers eat seated upon logs and overturned buckets. Conversation turns once again toward weapons. Specifically the pike. One younger recruit admits he feared swords before joining. Now, not so much. What changed, someone asks. The recruit gestures toward the field. That. General laughter follows. The veteran beside you nods. Experience has a habit of rearranging priorities. The afternoon passes slowly. Clouds drift overhead. Training continues. The rhythmic movement becomes almost hypnotic. Advance. Stop. Lower. Raise. Turn. Advance again. It resembles farming in some strange way. The same patience. The same repetition. The same dependence on seasons and labour. Many soldiers, after all, are farmers for much of the year. They know how to work together. They know how to endure discomfort. They know how to keep moving when conditions are miserable. These skills transfer remarkably well to carrying a 16-foot pole through mud. As daylight begins fading, the formations finally break apart. Men gather equipment. Wagons creak. Campfires appear. The scent of stew drifts through the cooling air. You share supper beside one such fire. The veteran sits nearby. Orange flames dance across weathered faces. Shadows lengthen. A distant bell rings from an abbey hidden beyond rolling hills. The sound carries surprisingly far in the cold evening air. Someone asks the veteran what weapon he fears most. He stares into the fire, then smiles. You'll hear about another tomorrow. The younger soldiers groan. He laughs softly. It's true. The list never gets shorter. Darkness settles across the countryside. Stars emerge overhead. The pikes stand bundled beside wagons like sleeping trees. Silent now. Harmless now. Yet all day you have watched experienced soldiers regard them with genuine respect. Not because they are dramatic, not because they are legendary, because they work. And in the medieval world, few things inspire more caution than a weapon that works exactly as intended. The fire crackles. The dog curls beside your boots once again. Somehow he has followed you all this way. No one seems surprised. Tomorrow another feared weapon awaits. But tonight, beneath the winter stars, the long pikes rest quietly against the dark. The night passes beneath a sky of pale stars and drifting cloud. You sleep lightly beside the campfire, wrapped in wool blankets, while frost gathers on wagon wheels, and the bundled pikes stand like silent sentries at the edge of camp. Every so often the dog lifts his head, surveys the darkness with great seriousness, and then decides the world remains acceptable enough to continue sleeping. Before dawn, a monastery bell sounds somewhere beyond the hills. One note, then another, then silence. The soldiers begin stirring. A cook pokes life into dying embers. Someone mutters about cold fingers. Another complains that winter was clearly invented by people who never had to sleep outdoors. The complaint receives widespread support. Soon you're moving again. The road winds through low countryside where frozen puddles crack beneath boots. Bare trees line hedgerows. Thin ribbons of mist drift above streams. The company is not marching toward battle. Not today. Instead, they are escorting supplies toward a market town several miles away. The journey is slow. Oxen pull carts loaded with grain sacks, tools, and barrels. Merchants travel with them. So do pilgrims. So do a few monks returning to an abbey. The medieval road rarely belongs to only one kind of traveller. Everyone shares it. Everyone complains about it. By mid-morning, clouds gather overhead. Rain begins. Not dramatic rain, not heroic rain, the sort of persistent drizzle that seems personally offended by human happiness. Within an hour, cloaks grow heavy. Boots sink deeper into mud. The dog resembles a damp rug with opinions. At last, the road reaches a gatehouse overlooking a narrow river crossing. The travellers gladly seek shelter. You duck beneath the stone arch. Inside, a fire burns in a corner hearth. The gatehouse keeper welcomes everyone with the enthusiasm of a man who has spent 20 years watching wet travellers appear unexpectedly. Which is to say, not much enthusiasm at all. Still, warmth is warmth. People settle wherever they can. A merchant dries gloves. A monk opens a small prayer book. An old woman unwraps bread and onions from a cloth bundle. Rain taps steadily against the roof. The atmosphere grows quiet, comfortable, sleepy, and then someone mentions crossbows. The conversation shifts immediately, not loudly, not dramatically, but noticeably. Several soldiers glance toward one another. One veteran lets out a slow breath. Another pokes at the fire. The gatehouse keeper chuckles. There it is. You look at him. What? The weapon nobody wants aimed at them. He nods toward a man seated near the wall. The man has been silent all morning. Beside him rests a crossbow. At first glance, it appears almost modest. Compact. Practical. Unremarkable. Certainly less impressive than the towering pikes from yesterday. Yet the room regards it differently. The crossbowman notices your curiosity. He smiles. You expected something larger. Perhaps you did. He lifts the weapon. The wooden stock shines from years of use. The steel bow at the front curves elegantly. Everything about it seems deliberate, purposeful, built to do one job well. Outside, rain continues falling. Inside, the crossbowman explains. A sword demands strength. He shrugs. A pike demands formation. His fingers tap the stock. This demands patience. The others nod. Patience. The word returns several times during the discussion, because that is one reason medieval soldiers feared crossbows. Not merely the weapon, the person willing to wait behind it. A crossbowman might spend hours watching a road, hours watching a wall, hours watching a gate. Still, silent, observant, the crossbowman seated beside the fire demonstrates how the weapon loads. Slowly, carefully. He hooks a belt attachment, pulls, locks the string, checks the mechanism. Every movement feels measured. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. Rainwater trickles down the stone walls. The fire crackles softly. A monk listening nearby shakes his head. Too much machinery. The crossbowman laughs, coming from a man whose monastery owns 3 clocks. The monk cannot argue. The gatehouse erupts in gentle laughter. For centuries, people debate crossbows. Some admire them. Some distrust them. Some claim they make warfare less noble. Others point out that being struck by something noble remains deeply unpleasant. No one can quite agree, yet everyone respects the weapon's effectiveness. The conversation drifts towards stories. Naturally, every medieval gathering eventually reaches stories. One soldier remembers defending a town years ago. Another recalls watching enemy crossbowmen appear across a foggy field. A merchant claims he once saw a quarrel pass completely through a wooden sign. Someone else insists the sign was probably rotten. The merchant insists otherwise. The debate continues for several minutes with surprising passion. Medieval people, like modern people, occasionally become very invested in details that no longer matter. Eventually the discussion settles. The crossbowman gazes into the fire. What makes it frightening isn't noise. He pauses. Or sighs. Another pause. It's certainty. The room grows quieter. Outside, the rain softens. You understand what he means. A charging horse announces itself. A screaming warrior announces himself. A crossbowman hidden behind a wall announces very little. That uncertainty lingers in the mind. You notice several travellers carrying small charms. A rabbit's foot. A carved saint. A polished stone. One soldier wears a tiny pilgrim badge depicting an archangel. Some swear such objects help turn away danger. Some swear they improve luck. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people trust the charm itself or simply enjoy feeling less helpless. Perhaps both. The afternoon drifts onward. The rain finally eases. Weak sunlight filters through grey clouds. The river below the gatehouse glitters briefly. Travellers begin preparing to continue. Before leaving, the crossbowman invites you to inspect his weapon more closely. You do. The craftsmanship impresses you. Iron fittings, smooth wood, careful design, everything balanced, everything intentional. This is not merely a weapon. It is a tool refined through generations of experience. The kind of object medieval people understand deeply, because their world depends upon tools. Axes, ploughs, knives, hammers, locks, keys, and occasionally crossbows. You resume your journey. The road follows the river. Water rushes over stones. Crows circle distant fields. The dog splashes through puddles with reckless confidence. Toward evening, you arrive at a small settlement surrounded by wooden palisades. Smoke rises from chimneys. Children chase one another through muddy lanes. A blacksmith works beneath an open-sided shed. The familiar rhythm of medieval life continues. Supper awaits in a communal hall. Stew simmers over the hearth. All fills wooden cups. Wet cloaks hang drying near the fire. As darkness gathers outside, the conversations of the day linger in your thoughts. Yesterday brought pikes. Today brought crossbows. Different weapons, different fears. Yet both inspire respect for the same reason. Not because they are monstrous. Not because they are magical. Because somewhere, someone has become very skilled at using them. A winter wind rattles shutters. The dog claims a spot near the hearth before anyone else can. A wise decision. The fire burns lower. Voices soften. And while the rainwater still drips from roof edges outside, you find yourself wondering about the next weapon waiting somewhere farther down the road. Dawn breaks with a thin, silver light spilling across the frosted fields. You wake to the faint clatter of hooves and the smell of damp straw mingled with smoke from the hearth that never quite seems to die. Outside, frost clings stubbornly to the thatch of cottages and the edges of wooden carts, glinting like scattered fragments of broken glass. The dog from yesterday pads beside your boots, damp fur sticking in clumps, yawning with exaggerated theatricality as if the day ahead requires solemn preparation. You step out into the chill, the morning mist curling around your ankles as the road stretches ahead. Soldiers adjust their cloaks and boots, the rhythmic clomp of leather soles on wet cobblestones accompanying their muted conversation. Somewhere in the distance, the first bells of the abbey toll, each note drifting across the fields and wrapping the town in an unhurried, sleepy rhythm. Soon, the road narrows and you find yourself approaching a small rise. Ahead, figures appear against the pale light arches. They stand in orderly ranks, longbows strung, yew wood gleaming faintly with the last remnants of dew. The air hums with a quiet tension, though nothing has yet happened. No charge, no battle, just the still, taut anticipation of things that can fly faster than you can blink. You step closer, curious, careful not to disturb the silent vigil. A veteran beside you whispers, "The longbow. It doesn't roar like a cannon, but it cuts through the air like a cold wind. Faster than any horse, straighter than any lance. That's why it frightens men more than the grandest sword." His voice carries a soft, reverent tone, like he's describing both a tool and a living thing. You watch as young Archer draws his bow, testing the string. The tension in his arms is mirrored in the taut line of the bow itself. An arrow glances off a wooden target, the small thwack resonating with a hollow, satisfying note. Others follow, releasing shafts in careful rhythm. The field becomes a place of soft hissing sounds. Arrows cutting through mist and damp air, a quiet symphony of danger. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the archer's skill or the weapon itself is more frightening. Some swear the longbow can pierce armour from astonishing distance. Others claim that a skilled archer can unseat a knight before he sees the tip of the arrow. No one can quite agree, but all agree on one thing: open ground under a hail of arrows is a place where survival depends as much on luck as skill. As you stand among the soldiers, watching, a breeze rustles through the nearby hedgerows. Frosted leaves shimmer. The dog whines softly, perhaps sensing the latent threat in the air. Nearby, a pilgrim adjusts his badge, touching it for reassurance against dangers that feel entirely invisible. Medieval superstition, skill, and fear intertwine seamlessly here. The veteran beside you gestures toward the advancing arrows. Notice how they move as one, the volley, the rhythm. Discipline is the weapon, as much as the bow itself. You nod, absorbing the hypnotic cadence of repeated releases. There's a quiet artistry to it, a deadly grace. By midday, The mist lifts slightly, revealing the expanse of the field and the unwavering ranks of archers. You move closer to see how the tips of the arrows catch the weak sunlight, gleaming faintly like threads of silver against the green and brown. You realize that the longbow is more than a weapon. It's a force that transforms the landscape itself, turning open ground into a no-man's land even before any enemy arrives. The dog curls at your feet, ears pricked, body tense. Even he seems aware of the invisible danger slicing through the field. Soldiers nearby murmur about past battles, about towns held and lost to the sky-raining arrows. Some speak in awe, others in dread. Every tale is tinged with uncertainty. Stories grow in size as they pass from mouth to mouth. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on the details. A small child from a nearby village peeks through the edge of the woods, eyes wide, clutching a carved saint. She watches the soldiers and archers, curiosity mixed with instinctive fear. Perhaps she's heard the tales already, or perhaps the sight of disciplined men bending bows so uniformly is enough to impress caution into any young mind. By late afternoon, the archers pack their gear, storing longbows in carefully carved racks, preparing for the next demonstration. The road awaits you, muddy and glistening, stretching east toward the next village and another kind of weapon, another kind of fear. The sun dips lower. Shadows stretch across the field. The distant Abbey bell tolls, marking the passage of time with a sleepy cadence. You lift your cloak, adjust your boots, and begin walking again, carrying the impression of arrows, discipline, and the silent terror of the longbow into the fading light. The road carries you onward beneath a sky the colour of worn wool. By the time the last echoes of the Abbey bell fade behind you, evening has begun gathering across the countryside. Frost lingers in shaded ditches. Thin smoke rises from scattered cottages. The dog trots faithfully ahead, occasionally stopping to inspect matters of tremendous importance known only to dogs and perhaps a few saints. The longbows remain behind, yet the memory of them lingers. You still hear the soft hiss of arrows whenever the wind moves through bare branches. You still picture those orderly ranks standing beneath the pale sky. But the road is already leading toward another lesson. Another weapon? Another fear? As darkness approaches, you reach a small manor village clustered around a stone hall. Warm light glows from narrow windows. A stable boy carries water buckets across a muddy yard. Chickens, apparently unconcerned with military history, peck determinedly at frozen ground. The manor steward welcomes travellers inside for the night. Soon you find yourself seated within a smoky hall beneath soot-dark rafters. Rushes cover the floor. Beeswax candles flicker along trestle tables. A fire crackles in a broad hearth large enough to roast an ox. Not that an ox is currently being roasted. Tonight's meal is considerably less ambitious. Pottage, bread, a little cheese, a few slices of smoked fish. The medieval world rarely wastes food on unnecessary drama. You settle onto a bench. Nearby, several veterans warm themselves by the fire. Their equipment hangs from pegs. Mail shirts, helmets, belts, worn gloves, and resting beside one bench, a weapon that immediately captures your attention. A mace. Simple. Compact. Heavy. The sort of object that looks as though it was designed by someone who disliked unnecessary decoration. One of the veterans notices your gaze. He lifts the weapon. Its iron head catches the firelight. You've heard enough about sharp things. The others chuckle. Time to discuss blunt problems. The laughter grows. Even in medieval halls, soldiers appreciate a good joke. particularly when someone else might eventually experience the problem. The veteran balances the mace across his knees. Unlike the elegant longbow, unlike the towering pike, unlike the carefully engineered crossbow, the mace appears brutally straightforward. Iron attached to a handle, purpose attached to iron. The end. Yet the atmosphere in the room subtly changes. The respect remains, perhaps even deepens. You ask why. The veteran turns the weapon slowly. Armor, that single word explains much. For centuries, armor grows stronger. Mail shirts become more sophisticated. Helmets improve. Protective equipment evolves constantly. Naturally, weapons evolve alongside it. The dance never stops. One veteran scratches his beard. A sword can slide. Another nods. An arrow can glance away. The man holding the mace taps its iron head. This doesn't need perfect luck. Silence follows. The fire pops softly. Outside, wind rattles shutters. Inside, you begin understanding why experienced soldiers speak of maces with such caution. Because their purpose differs. Not to cut, not necessarily to pierce, but to transfer force. A concept medieval warriors understand very well. One older man loosens his sleeve. A thick scar circles his forearm. Years ago, he says, my armor stopped the blow. He pauses. It just didn't stop all of it. The room erupts with knowing laughter. You notice something interesting. No one describes dramatic wounds. No one tells heroic stories. Instead, they discuss bruises, broken confidence, ringing ears, aching limbs, the less glamorous realities of surviving violence. The veteran beside the fire lifts his cup. Armor is wonderful. Several men raise cups in agreement. Until someone starts hitting it. More laughter. The hall grows warmer. Stew arrives. Bowls pass from hand to hand. You eat slowly while listening. Conversation drifts toward tournaments, training yards, old campaigns. One man remembers a knight who spent enormous sums decorating his armor. Polished steel, fancy engraving, coloured ribbons. The works. Apparently the same knight was later struck by a mace during practice. His beautifully polished armor survived perfectly. His dignity did not. The story receives enthusiastic approval. Few things unite people faster than witnessing arrogance encounter reality. Outside, darkness settles fully. The wind grows stronger. Servants secure heavy oak doors. Iron keys rattle softly. The hall becomes a small island of warmth surrounded by winter night. Near the hearth, an elderly woman places herbs into a pouch. She notices your curiosity. For protection, she says. Protection from what remains unclear. Possibly illness. Possibly bad luck. Possibly both. Many medieval remedies operate on wonderfully broad principles. Some swear rosemary wards off evil influences. Others carry dried herbs against fevers. Some place protective charms above doors. No one can quite agree whether such things truly work. Yet very few people seem eager to abandon them entirely. The soldiers return to discussing weapons. Specifically what they fear. Not every answer matches. One dislikes arrows. Another dislikes crossbows. A third distrusts anything involving fire. But when the subject turns to maces, the mood shifts. Subtly, noticeably, respectfully. Because everyone understands what the weapon is meant to do. There is little mystery involved. One veteran pokes at the fire. You know the worst part. You wait. It never looks impressive. He shrugs. People expect terrifying weapons to look terrifying. The others nod. A fair point. Many feared objects appear surprisingly ordinary. A mace lacks grandeur, no glittering blade, no dramatic flourish, just quiet practicality. And perhaps that practicality makes it more unsettling. The same quality appears throughout medieval life. The strongest lock is often plain. The best boots rarely attract attention. The most reliable horse is seldom the prettiest. Effectiveness frequently arrives without ceremony. Hours pass. The candles burn lower. Smoke drifts lazily toward the rafters. Some travellers sleep near the fire. Others continue talking softly. Outside, snow begins falling once more. You eventually step outside for a moment. The village lies silent beneath fresh snow. Watchfires glow near the manor gate. A distant monastery bell marks the evening office. Its sound drifts across frozen fields. The world feels smaller now, quieter, gentler. Yet somewhere beyond those fields stand castles, roads, forests, and battlefields where weapons continue shaping lives. You look upward. Snowflakes drift through torchlight. Each one appears briefly before vanishing into darkness. Behind you, laughter escapes the hall. The veterans are still sharing stories, still comparing old scars, still debating which weapon deserves the greatest fear. No one fully agrees. Perhaps they never will. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. But tonight, seated beside a warm fire in a manor hall, listening to experienced soldiers speak honestly rather than heroically, you learn something important. The weapons most feared are not always the most famous. Sometimes they are simply the ones that perform their task with stubborn reliability. The dog appears beside you and sits in the snow. For reasons known only to him, he seems entirely satisfied with this arrangement. You return to the warmth of the hall. The fire glows softly. The candles flicker. And beyond the thick oak doors, winter continues gathering across the sleeping countryside while thoughts of iron maces linger quietly in your mind. Morning arrives pale and tentative, slipping across the horizon like water through a narrow spout. You wake to the scent of damp straw mixed with last night's smoke, and the lingering aroma of pottage that somehow seems to cling to the walls themselves. Outside, the dog shakes off frost and follows as you step into the cold, grey light of a misty courtyard. The manor's gates creak as they open, releasing a road that winds through timbered fences and frozen fields, muddy in patches, slick with ice in others. Soldiers gather at the edge of the village, cloaks drawn tight. They carry bundles of gear and, among them, the weapons that today will command attention: axes, not swords, not pikes, not maces, axes, balanced, brutal, and perfectly suited for the confined spaces of a breached gate or splintered barricade. You trudge alongside the company toward a small, battered bridge that spans a sluggish, swollen river. Water murmurs beneath, grey and cold, and the air carries a faint metallic tang. Beyond, a timbered barricade has been erected for practice. Logs are lashed together. Nails jut at irregular angles. A few scattered stones provide uneven footing. The captain gestures toward the barricade. "Observe," he says. "A well-placed axe can turn this into a nightmare." You watch as a young recruit approaches the wall. His face is taut with focus. He grips a battle-axe in both hands, its head gleaming faintly, the haft wrapped in leather to prevent slipping. Another soldier stands behind him, offering guidance, while a veteran kneels at the base, adjusting splintered boards. The recruit swings. The blade arcs through the cold air, meeting timber with a satisfying thud. Splinters fly. The sound resonates like dull thunder. The training ground smells of resin, wet wood, and iron. Nearby, an experienced fighter demonstrates a downward chop, splitting a reinforced beam in two. Another soldier tests a hooked axe, designed to pull opponents from cover or unseat them from horseback if needed. The mechanics are subtle, precise, and terrifyingly effective. You notice how the weapon moves as an extension of the wielder's arms, yet possesses a will of its own. Some swear that the axe prefers chaos. Others insist it responds to strength and patience in equal measure. No one can quite agree. The group pauses. The captain wipes his brow with a sooty sleeve and explains the practical lessons behind this exercise. Axes, unlike swords or pikes, thrive in confined, splintered spaces, a narrow gate, a partially collapsed wall, a timber barricade. They exploit angles and weaknesses that larger weapons cannot reach. You glance at the surrounding forest edge, imagining an enemy forcing its way through such terrain. Fallen logs, muddy trenches, the smell of wet earth and pine resin thick in the air. The axes gleam faintly, promising quiet efficiency. A veteran chuckles softly, shaking his head. The first time a man faces this up close, he learns quickly to respect it. No ceremony, no fanfare, just pain, efficiency, and noise that echoes in your bones. You note how small details dominate the lesson: the grain of the wood, the angle of the swing, the weight distribution in the handle. The medieval mind thinks about weapons as extensions of skill, patience, and spatial awareness. After several hours, the soldiers break to eat near a fire. Bread is torn roughly. Cheese slices are shared. A few drink watered ale. Conversation drifts, naturally, toward past experiences with axes. One tells of defending a town gate, timber barricades splintered under pressure. Another recalls chopping through an enemy's shield to reach the man behind it. Stories are practical, subdued, and carry the quiet tension of someone recalling close encounters without embellishment. Outside, clouds gather once more, hinting at evening rain. Frost begins forming again along the road edges. The dog settles near your boots, ears twitching at distant sounds. Somewhere, a crow lands on a fence post, tilting its head curiously. The captain collects the axes, checking each blade carefully. The training is over, yet the fear they inspire lingers, not because they are spectacular, not because they are grand, but because they function with unerring reliability in the spaces where soldiers are most vulnerable. As the company prepares to move on, you pause to glance back at the barricade. Splintered wood, iron-headed axes, footprints in mud. Everything seems still, almost innocuous. Yet you know better. Somewhere in the shadows, the quiet, methodical menace of these weapons remains, waiting for the moment to assert itself. You step forward once more, the road stretching ahead toward distant hills, another village, and the next story of fear in the medieval arsenal. Torchlight and firelight flicker across windows in scattered cottages. The wind carries faint smells of smoke, wet earth, and pine. And for a moment, the world feels both expansive and intimately dangerous, as it always does in the presence of well-crafted, lethal simplicity. By the time you reach the edge of a dense woodland, the afternoon light has softened to a muted gold, filtering through bare branches and casting long, trembling shadows across the muddy track. You trudge along beside the soldiers, the dog padding faithfully ahead, its fur flecked with mud and glinting drops of melted frost. Somewhere above, crows circle, their cries distant and almost musical against the hush of the trees. The air smells of wet earth, pine resin, and the faint tang of iron from yesterday's practice. A small monastery appears nestled against the hill, its stone walls darkened by centuries of smoke and damp. Monks move quietly about the grounds, carrying baskets of herbs, firewood, and supplies. One pauses to lock the iron-bound doors of the storeroom, glancing at you with a polite, cautious curiosity. You notice barrels of oil, bundles of straw, and pottery vessels stacked neatly against the wall flame, and pitch carefully stored for the day when fire might be more friend than enemy. The captain halts the company near a low stone wall. He gestures toward the monastery storehouse. "You've faced blades and axes," he says, voice quiet but firm. "Now consider something less. Tangible. Fire. Pitch. And all the clever ways humans have learned to fling them at one another." You glance at the collection of materials, small fires crackling inside safe iron containers. Monks tend the flames with careful precision, each movement deliberate, aware that a single mistake could turn warmth into disaster. The smell of resin and smoke rises, sharp against the damp forest air. One veteran speaks softly, almost as if afraid to disturb the air around the barrels. Nothing is quite like seeing it suddenly arrive where you least expect it. Smoke first, heat second, panic third. You shiver, though not from cold. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the fear comes from knowledge or imagination. Some swear that fire thrown from a height behaves unpredictably. Others claim it follows simple rules of physics. No one can quite agree. But all know that flame, once unleashed, is a weapon that cares nothing for rank, strength, or armor. A monk carries a small pot of glowing coals to a training area. He demonstrates how it can be tossed safely, landing in controlled space, the liquid pitch contained. Yet the soldiers nod, knowing that real battles rarely allow for such precision. A careless spark, a moment of wind, and suddenly walls burn, roofs collapse, and smoke fills lungs that have no time to filter it. Nearby, a young recruit pokes at a firepot with a stick, fascinated. "It seems simple," he says. "Simple," mutters a veteran, "until it's not. Then it's chaos, and you're just part of it." You step closer, watching as the monks demonstrate moving barrels of pitch with padded gloves, careful not to jostle the contents. The men-at-arms examine the technique, nodding, memorizing every detail as though the knowledge alone could protect them. A crow lands on a nearby fence post, eyeing the activity curiously. You notice the dog growl softly, tail low, ears forward. Even animals understand when fire becomes more than warmth. The veteran beside you recounts a tale from a siege years ago. A roof caught fire, smoke filled the hall, soldiers scrambled, mud and ash mingling beneath boots. Flames spread faster than anyone expected. The walls themselves seemed intent on surrender. The story ends with survival, but only just. Few laughed. Many shivered, recounting how helpless they felt when fire moved according to its own cruel logic. In the soft gold of late afternoon, smoke rises slowly from the storehouse. The firepots hiss. The pitch gleams darkly in its containers. The soldiers nod to one another, knowing the lesson a weapon need not strike with sharp steel to command respect. Sometimes it merely waits, patient, precise, and inevitable. You breathe in the cool forest air, tinged with resin, smoke, and damp earth. The road ahead will take you beyond the trees, toward more weapons, more fear, and the stories that grow around them. But for now, the quiet crackle of controlled flame reminds you that survival often depends not on heroics, but on understanding, patience, and respect for forces beyond one's immediate control. The dog curls at your feet, content for the moment, ears twitching at every tiny pop and hiss. You glance at the monks, the soldiers, the barrels of pitch, and the hissing, glowing coals, and realize that fire, in its deliberate chaos, has earned its place among the weapons most feared in the medieval world. The road narrows as you follow the soldiers toward the manor yard, the last slivers of afternoon light glinting off frost-tipped hedgerows. Your boots sink slightly into the softened earth, the mud clinging stubbornly as if reminding you that every step in this medieval world carries effort and consequence. The dog trots beside you, nose twitching, occasionally sniffing at an overturned log or a patch of trampled grass, ever vigilant for dangers invisible to human eyes. Ahead, torches flare along the walls of the manor yard, casting a golden glow on timber and stone alike. Soldiers gather around a central area where poles, beams, and ropes have been arranged for training. Today, you're to witness another weapon, the pole hammer. Unlike axes, maces, or pikes, this instrument is a study in leverage and cruel geometry. Its hooked head and heavy weight designed to exploit armor rather than simply overwhelm flesh. You approach cautiously. A veteran lifts a pole hammer with practiced ease, swinging it in a wide, deliberate arc. The sound resonates through the courtyard, a dull, thudding echo that seems to vibrate in your chest. You notice the angle at which it falls, the way the weight is distributed along the shaft, and how the hook at the end can pull, tear, and unbalance an opponent without the need for precision cutting. The soldiers begin demonstrating maneuvers. One swings the hammer downward, the hook catching a reinforced target shield. Splinters fly, the air shivers with force, and the shield rocks violently, a small simulation of what might happen to a man behind it. Another veteran tests the weapon's reach, levering the hook around a post and demonstrating how it can displace a shield or unseat a mounted adversary. Each movement is methodical, efficient, and terrifying in its simplicity. A young recruit watches, face pale beneath his hood. It seems unfair, he whispers. The veteran beside him nods. Unfair. Yes, but necessary. The battlefield rarely rewards fairness. Outside, wind rattles shutters and stirs frost along the edges of the yard. Birds scatter from bare trees, startled by the echoing impacts. The dog growls softly, ears low, sensing the raw force being wielded nearby. The captain steps forward, voice calm yet carrying authority. Remember, he says, this weapon does not rely on finesse alone. It relies on weight, leverage, and understanding the weaknesses of what armor can and cannot protect. A man who ignores these lessons quickly learns the difference between confidence and foolishness. Nearby, a monk adjusts a pilgrim badge tied to his cloak, muttering prayers for protection against both steel and misfortune. Some swear the saint depicted on the badge protects travellers from sudden injury. Others claim it only works if the owner truly believes. You cannot tell which is true, but the badge, like the pole hammer itself, is a reminder of human reliance on tools both physical and spiritual. The soldiers continue their drills. Swings, pulls, and feints repeat in a measured rhythm, the heavy heads of the pole hammers singing a low, steady song of force. You notice the way the weapon seems to move almost independently, responding to gravity, momentum, and the wielder's precise timing. It is brutal and elegant simultaneously, a contradiction you do not attempt to untangle. As dusk deepens, torches flicker more vividly against the timbered walls, casting elongated shadows that sway across the courtyard. Snow begins to fall lightly, dusting the training ground in pale flakes that vanish into mud and footprints. The air smells faintly of pine, wet earth, and iron, the subtle signature of a place where skill, practice, and lethal intent intertwine. The veteran lifts the pole hammer once more, demonstrating a slow, sweeping motion. "Do not mistake elegance for safety," he says. "This weapon will remind you, again and again, that armor is only protection if you respect the force behind it." You step back slightly, allowing space for both the lesson and the echoing rhythm of swinging iron. The dog settles near your boots, ears twitching as if marking each thud. Somewhere along the courtyard edge, a crow lands on a fence post, watching silently. Even animals, it seems, acknowledge the subtle menace of the pole hammer. By the time practice ends, shadows have deepened into night. Soldiers collect their weapons carefully, balancing the heavy hammers and hooks with precise movements, honed by hours of repetition. The manor yard is quiet once more, save for the distant sound of the river, the rustling of bare branches, and the low murmur of tired men speaking softly among themselves. You watch them, considering the polehammer's deadly combination of simplicity, leverage, and force. Unlike fire, unlike arrows, unlike axes, it does not rely on confusion, speed, or numbers. It relies on understanding, patience, and sheer weight. And that understanding, once acquired, leaves a lasting impression on those who face it. The dog yawns and curls at your feet, utterly unafraid. You take a final glance at the courtyard, torches and shadows, and feel the weight of lessons learned. The medieval world is full of tools, each with its own logic, fear, and inevitable consequences. The morning fog rises slowly from the river valley as you and the soldiers continue along the muddy road. The dog padding dutifully at your side, damp straw, and the scent of wet earth mingle with the lingering aroma of last night's fire from the manor yard. Carts creak under the weight of supplies, and the soft clop of horse hooves punctuates the rhythm of travel. Somewhere overhead, crows glide silently, their dark forms ghosting against the pale sky. Today's lesson comes not from towering pikes, slender arrows, or swinging hammers, but from small, easily hidden blades, rondel daggers, knives tucked into belts, and other subtle tools of survival. Soldiers joke quietly among themselves about how the tiniest edge can unseat a man more effectively than any grand sword when wielded in close quarters. The company halts at a narrow bridge spanning a frozen stream. Wooden railings, slick with frost, offer little protection from a determined hand with a concealed blade. The veteran leading the discussion lifts a short rondel dagger from his belt. Its steel gleams faintly, simple and unadorned. "Never underestimate the small ones," he says. "They are quiet, they are quick, and they appear when you least expect them." You watch as a recruit practices parrying with the dagger, its light weight and sharp point requiring precision rather than brute force. The veteran demonstrates a subtle twist, using the dagger to deflect a thrust aimed at the chest, then to hook and unbalance a target. Every motion is deliberate, economical. You realize that these knives are less about spectacle and more about exploiting opportunity, angle, and vulnerability. The soldiers explain why such small weapons are feared in tight corridors, behind barricades, or amidst chaos in a market or manor hall. They allow a skilled user to turn advantage against larger, stronger, or better armored opponents. Even now, it is difficult to tell whether the weapon itself or the human skill behind it inspires more trepidation. Some swear it is both, inseparably. Nearby, a merchant carries bundles across the bridge, A child clings to her mother's cloak, watching the practice with wide eyes. Pilgrims adjust their badges, muttering prayers for protection. Some swear the saint depicted keeps harm away from those threatened by small, hidden blades. Others claim the blessing is merely psychological, easing anxiety in dangerous spaces. No one fully agrees, yet the combination of faith and metal serves to comfort, if not prevent, misfortune. The veteran recounts a story from a siege years ago. An enemy infiltrator slipped past guards in a dark corridor with nothing larger than a dagger. Chaos followed swiftly. Missteps compounded mistakes. Panic spread, and though no one died immediately, morale crumbled. The lesson: the smallest weapon, wielded with cunning, can disrupt even disciplined defenses. You notice the soldiers' posture as they handle the daggers: careful, controlled, respectful. There is humour in their instructions, gentle jokes about never tickling an enemy with your knife, but also solemnity. These blades demand both attention and humility. The fog begins to lift. Sunlight glimmers off frost-covered stones. The dog shakes, scattering droplets onto your boots, and resumes its place at your side. The river glints faintly beneath the trees, a silver thread winding through the landscape. Training concludes with silent practice runs, each soldier moving deliberately, weaving, striking, and retreating, small, precise, lethal. The lessons linger more in the mind than on the skin, yet the subtle fear of concealed knives imprints itself quietly on your thoughts. As the company continues down the road, the veteran smiles. "Remember," he says softly, "sometimes the smallest blade teaches the largest lesson." You nod, feeling the road's rhythm beneath your feet, the weight of mud, the cold air, and the quiet menace of weapons that do not need grandeur to be feared. Somewhere down the lane, another kind of danger waits, its story carried in the whispers of men who have walked the medieval world before you. The road leaves the river behind and climbs steadily through rolling farmland. Morning mist fades slowly, revealing fields edged with stone walls and bare hedgerows. Frost still lingers in the shadows, though the sun now hangs pale and bright above the countryside. Your boots remain damp. At this point, they seem committed to remaining damp for the foreseeable future. The dog, meanwhile, appears entirely at peace with life. He trots ahead confidently, occasionally glancing back to ensure you're still following him. You suspect he believes he is leading the expedition. No one corrects him. The company travels quietly. Yesterday's talk of daggers still lingers in your thoughts. Small weapons, hidden dangers, close quarters. Yet today's lesson will concern something entirely different. Something larger, older, and in a strange way, far more ordinary. By midday, the road reaches a fortified town perched atop a low rise. Stone walls surround it. Square towers overlook the fields. Watchmen patrol the battlements. A banner flutters lazily above the gate. The settlement shows signs of age. Weathered stone. Repaired sections of wall. Ancient timber supports. Generations have lived here. Generations have defended it. As you pass beneath the gate arch, the familiar smell of medieval life greets you. Wood smoke. Bread baking. Livestock. Wet wool. A faint hint of tanneries somewhere downwind. The combination is surprisingly distinctive. The soldiers lead you toward the upper walls. Children run through narrow streets. A blacksmith's hammer rings somewhere nearby. An elderly woman sells onions from a wooden cart. A monk carrying manuscripts hurries past, clearly worried about rain despite the clear sky. Life continues, as it always does. Even in places built for war, eventually you climb a winding stair inside one of the towers. The steps are uneven from centuries of use. The stone feels cool beneath your hand. At the top, the countryside unfolds in every direction. Fields, roads, forests, streams, tiny farms scattered across the landscape. Beautiful, peaceful. The captain joins you along the parapet. He rests his arms upon the stone. Look down. You do. The wall beneath your feet drops sharply toward the outer ditch. A long way down. Far enough. More than far enough. The captain nods. Today's weapon? You glance around. You see no bows, no pikes, no axes, no hammers. The captain smiles. Gravity. Several soldiers laugh. Yet none of them laugh very hard, because they understand. You soon learn why. Along the battlements lie piles of stones. Not decorative stones, not carefully shaped stones. Just rocks. Large rocks. Small rocks. Heavy rocks. Practical rocks. Nearby stand thick wooden beams stacked against the wall. The captain gestures toward them. During a siege, almost anything becomes a weapon. You walk beside the parapet. The lesson begins. A veteran explains how defenders prepare during times of danger. Stones are gathered. Water barrels are positioned. Beams are moved into place. Everything serves a purpose. Everything becomes useful. Because when enemies gather below walls, the defenders possess one enormous advantage. Height. The veteran picks up a stone, not especially large, perhaps the size of a loaf of bread. He weighs it thoughtfully, then sets it back down. No one fears this. He pauses. They fear where it starts. The soldiers nod. You look over the edge once more. The idea becomes clear. A stone sitting harmlessly on a wall is one thing. The same stone falling from a tower is something else entirely. The medieval world understands gravity intimately. Most people spend their lives carrying things, lifting things, building things, dropping things. Few lessons require formal education. A falling object teaches itself remarkably well. The afternoon passes as the veterans demonstrate defensive preparations. No actual projectiles are dropped. No dramatic displays occur. The atmosphere remains calm, almost scholarly, like craftsmen discussing tools, because that is essentially what they are doing. One soldier points toward a murder hole above the gate passage, a narrow opening through which defenders might observe or influence the people below. You peer upward. The design appears deceptively simple. Many medieval innovations do. The best ideas often seem obvious after someone invents them. Nearby, a mason repairing damaged stonework joins the conversation. His hands are white with dust. His beard contains enough mortar to qualify as a construction project. He explains how walls evolve over generations. One section strengthened, another repaired, a tower expanded, a stair rebuilt. Fortifications are never truly finished. They grow like living things, adapting continuously. You spend some time watching workers haul supplies upward. Ropes creak. Pulley wheels turn. Sweat glistens despite the cold weather. The effort required to maintain a fortress is enormous. People often imagine castles as symbols of power. The workers know better. Castles are symbols of maintenance, an endless, exhausting amount of maintenance. By late afternoon, clouds begin gathering once more. A cold wind sweeps across the battlements. You pull your cloak tighter. Below, merchants enter through the gate. Farmers arrive with wagons. Children chase one another through muddy streets. Ordinary life continues beneath extraordinary walls. A young guard joins you. He cannot be much older than 20. His helmet sits slightly crooked. He speaks quietly. When I first arrived here, I feared every weapon. You nod. Reasonable enough. What changed? The young guard looks across the fields. The walls. You wait. He smiles faintly. After enough months, you stop worrying about swords. His hand rests on the stone parapet. You start trusting this instead. The weathered stone beneath his fingers has protected countless people over countless years. Not perfectly. Nothing is perfect, but effectively, and effectiveness earns respect. As evening approaches, monastery bells drift across the countryside. Their sound reaches even this high place. Soft, distant, comforting. For a moment, everyone pauses. Workers, guards, travellers, even the captain. The bells remind them of time passing, of prayers, of meals, of home. The dog, having spent most of the afternoon sleeping in a patch of sunlight, finally wakes and stretches dramatically. He appears pleased with his contribution to military readiness. Below, candles begin appearing in windows. Smoke rises from chimneys. The town settles toward evening. You remain upon the wall a little longer, looking outward, thinking about today's lesson. No legendary weapon, no famous blade, no master-crafted masterpiece. Only stones, wood, height, and gravity. Yet every soldier you meet respects them, perhaps fears them, because some dangers are terrifying precisely because they are so simple. A rock remains a rock, until it begins falling. A beam remains a beam, until it begins moving. The laws governing both care very little about courage. Night gathers slowly. Torches flicker along the battlements. The bells sound one final time before darkness deepens. And as you descend the tower stair toward warmth, supper, and shelter, you understand why defenders throughout the medieval world often trusted walls and falling stones as much as any weapon forged by human hands. The dog follows close behind. His duties, apparently, are never finished. The road beyond the town rolls gently through low hills, shrouded in morning mist that clings to the ground like wool pressed damp against stone. You trudge along beside the soldiers, your boots squelching in mud softened by overnight frost and drizzle. The dog pads ahead, nose to the ground, tail wagging intermittently as if conducting reconnaissance on every twig, puddle, and tuft of grass. By midday, you reach a crossroads marked by a modest stone shrine. Its carved saint gazes serenely over the muddy lanes. A few pilgrims kneel before it, touching the weathered figure with reverent hands. Some swear that the saint offers protection from sudden accidents. Others insist he intervenes in conflicts with uncanny precision. Even now, it is hard to tell whether belief, coincidence, or legend fuels these tales. Those who tell the story never fully agree. As you pause, a low rumble vibrates through the valley. At first, it is subtle, almost imperceptible, like distant thunder, then another rumble, and another. A veteran beside you squints into the mist. Hand cannons, he mutters, voice tinged with both awe and trepidation, or bombards, depending on whom you ask. No one can quite agree when thunder first belonged to men rather than sky. You strain your eyes toward the distant rise. Smoke curls faintly into the grey air. Soldiers unpack barrels of powder, carefully stacking small cannons for demonstration. The smell of sulphur lingers faintly even before firing. Every movement is deliberate. One misstep and disaster could be instant. The veteran continues, explaining how these early firearms revolutionized siege warfare. The thunderous crack, the unexpected flash, and the sudden weight of a ball striking stone or timber instilled fear in ways that swords, pikes, and arrows rarely could. Some swear a single blast could unseat even the most disciplined troops, leaving chaos in its wake. Others insist the weapon's unreliability was its own danger, capable of misfiring, exploding, or killing its own crew. No one fully agrees. Yet all fear it. Nearby, a monk adjusts the cords of his cloak nervously, muttering prayers. Pilgrims touch their badges. Soldiers handle the weapons with both respect and trepidation. The dog growls softly, ears flat, as though sensing the latent power of controlled fire and metal. The hand cannon demonstration begins. A spark ignites the powder. The first shot erupts, smoke curling upward, shaking windows of the nearby hamlet. The ground trembles beneath your boots. The air carries a sharp, acrid scent that stings the nose. Soldiers flinch, even those familiar with the weapon. You notice the young recruit beside you gripping the railing, wide-eyed, pale-faced. The veteran chuckles softly. The earliest thunder belongs to no one. You can train, prepare, pray, but the noise itself teaches respect. Another shot follows, louder, more precise. The recoil knocks the firing crew back slightly, yet the ball travels true. Smoke drifts lazily across the valley, mingling with morning mist. The combination of thunder, fire, and motion leaves a lingering tension in the air, subtle but persistent. You watch the cannonballs strike distant walls and barricades. Sparks fly, splintered wood rattles, dust rises. Soldiers murmur quietly among themselves, recounting stories of battles where these weapons decided outcomes before swords even touched flesh. Some swear that the first sound of a hand cannon sends panic rippling through men who have faced arrows, pikes, and axes alike. Others insist it's the uncertainty when, where, and how it will strike that terrifies most. No one can quite agree. The demonstration ends. Smoke curls into the trees. Soldiers lower the barrels and inspect powder and ignition mechanisms. Pilgrims bow at the shrine once more, touching the saint as though divine protection might extend to bullets and thunder alike. The dog resumes sniffing at mud and grass, unconcerned with thunder belonging to men rather than sky. As the company continues along the misty road, the valley behind you filled with lingering smoke and echoes of thunder, you carry with you the uneasy lesson that human ingenuity can capture the power of nature itself, and when it does, even the most experienced soldiers tread carefully, mindful that fear travels not only through sight and sound, but also through expectation, rumour, and legend. The road ahead remains long, muddy, and uncertain, and yet it also carries promise, more lessons, more stories, and more weapons that shape lives quietly but profoundly across the medieval world. The afternoon arrives damp and grey, the sky heavy with low-hanging clouds that threaten rain yet deliver only mist. You trudge along the churned, muddy lane, boots sinking deeper with each step, the dog splashing through puddles ahead, occasionally darting to sniff at something only he can perceive. The soldiers move deliberately, aware that wet, uneven ground demands attention. Every footfall is measured, a quiet lesson in balance, patience, and endurance. Soon, the company approaches a narrow stretch of road littered with debris-broken carts, scattered straw, and, Most importantly, small iron spikes partially hidden in the mud. The captain stops abruptly. "Caltrops," he says, voice low, simple, small, deadly in ways most ignore until it's too late. You kneel to examine one. 4 short spikes radiate from a central point, each sharpened to pierce leather, boot, or hoof. The design is elegant in its simplicity. A horse steps onto one and reacts immediately. The metal finds its target before the rider can respond. Soldiers demonstrate careful placement, showing how a few well-positioned spikes can halt cavalry, slow advances, or disrupt enemy formations. The lessons are subtle, almost surgical, yet undeniably effective. A veteran leans on a fence post, watching younger men practice. "People laugh at these," he says. "They call them toys. They underestimate them." Then someone steps wrong, and the laughter dies quickly. He taps one spike with a gloved hand. This teaches humility more reliably than any sword. Nearby, a monk adjusts his prayer beads, muttering quietly. Pilgrims glance at the spikes with apprehension, touching their saintly badges for reassurance. Some swear that such charms protect against iron and blade alike. Others claim it is merely comfort for a fearful mind. No one can quite agree. Yet all acknowledge the quiet menace of these small, scattered implements. The company moves slowly down the lane, stepping carefully around spikes, demonstrating how even minor obstacles can magnify danger. Soldiers describe sieges where caltrops disrupted entire cavalry charges, forcing horses to stumble, riders to fall, and formations to break apart. The strategic brilliance of the tiny weapons is clear. They do not need to impress with size or drama. Their effect relies entirely on placement, timing, and anticipation. You notice the rhythm of travel over this treacherous path. Step, pause, inspect, step, avoid. The mundane becomes tense. The ordinary becomes formidable. Each spike embodies latent threat, teaching you that even the smallest, simplest objects can wield power when used cleverly. A recruit murmurs softly, "It feels cruel." The veteran nods. Yes, but in war, cruelty is often unavoidable. Efficiency and fear go hand in hand. He gestures toward a pile of spare spikes. Scatter them wisely. Few things humble a horse, a boot, or a man more effectively. The mist thickens as you proceed, obscuring the fields on either side. Shadows of trees stretch across the road, swaying in the soft breeze. The dog pauses, sniffing carefully before continuing, as if he, too, respects the hidden danger beneath the mud. By evening, the road straightens and the spikes are behind you, carefully avoided or neutralized. Soldiers gather near a small fire at the side of the path, drying cloaks and warming hands. The dog curls near your boots, tail twitching in contentment. Smoke drifts lazily upward, blending with fog and fading daylight. The lesson remains vividly in your mind. Weapons do not need grandeur to inspire fear. Caltrops are small, unassuming, and remarkably effective. They turn ordinary ground into a trap, challenge confidence, and force vigilance. And though their form is simple, their impact on the medieval battlefield is profound. A quiet but persistent reminder that danger often hides in subtle, unassuming shapes. You rise, adjusting your cloak, and continue along the lane, aware that the next weapon, whatever it may be, awaits farther down the road, carrying with it another lesson in the intricate tapestry of medieval fear and ingenuity. The road narrows again as you trudge toward the rising hills beyond the village, the last of the afternoon sun gilding frost-laden fields in pale gold. Your boots squelch in mud, softened by intermittent drizzle. and the dog trots obediently beside you, occasionally darting to sniff a suspicious patch of grass or a crooked fence post. Somewhere in the distance, the faint toll of a monastery bell marks time in the soft, sleepy rhythm of the countryside. Ahead, banners rise over a small hilltop, mounted men wait, their lances couched, polished, and gleaming in the weak sun. Horses shift uneasily beneath their riders, nostrils flaring in the chill air, breath puffing like clouds of steam. Soldiers, cloaks drawn tight against the wind, whisper softly among themselves, their eyes flicking to the long, pointed weapons that have earned a reputation across the land lances. You join the small gathering at the base of the rise, watching the mounted men prepare. The weight of the lances, coupled with the speed of the horses, imbues the moment with a quiet tension. The veteran beside you leans in and mutters, "A couched lance does not lie. It tells the truth of momentum, weight, and inevitability." You study the riders. Each adjusts their grip, ensuring the lance rests firmly beneath the arm, aimed toward the invisible enemy below. The tip points forward like a silent herald of potential chaos. Even the horses sense it, shifting with a mixture of training and instinct. The medieval battlefield often begins with this combination of preparation, trust, and precision. The captain signals, and the mounted men begin their controlled advance. The sound of hooves striking the earth forms a steady rhythm, punctuated by the occasional snort or shuffle of a nervous horse. The lances extend forward, creating a forest of pointed iron aimed at the unseen foe. The effect is both mesmerizing and terrifying. Open ground, once benign, is transformed into a gauntlet of steel and power. A recruit whispers to you. It seems unstoppable. The veteran beside him nods. That is the point. You do not fight one lance. You face all of them. He pauses, letting the weight of the lesson sink in, and once they are moving at full speed, only luck or misstep spares you. Nearby, a blacksmith examines the lances, checking the steel tips and reinforcing points where wear has begun. The care lavished on these tools underscores their important speed, angle, and balance matter as much as brute force. Without preparation, even the strongest rider can falter. Pilgrims and travellers watch from the roadside, some clutching saintly badges for comfort, others muttering prayers beneath their breath. A child points at the advancing riders, wide-eyed, while a merchant adjusts a bundle of goods with a wary glance. Fear, curiosity, and respect intermingle naturally in the medieval mind. The veteran recounts a tale from a tournament long ago, where a couched lance unseated the favoured knight before he could even swing his sword. Discipline, timing, and the weight of iron and wood created an unstoppable force. The story is repeated quietly, emphasizing lessons rather than spectacle. Small details matter: footing, rein tension, lance angle, horse temperament. You note the hypnotic rhythm of the horses and riders, advancing in measured formation across the rise. The lance, simple yet fearsome, transforms ordinary speed into deadly inevitability. Even now, as the line passes and retreats, the memory of forward momentum, weight, and precision settles firmly in your mind. By evening, the sun sinks behind distant hills, casting long shadows across the field. Soldiers collect lances, securing them with ropes and checking tips. Horses are led back to stables, snorting softly into the chill. The dog curls near your boots, tail twitching in contentment. The lesson endures. The couched lance terrifies not because of legend, noise, or sudden surprise, but through weight, speed, and inevitability, discipline, momentum, and trust between horse and rider transform it into a weapon feared by all who must meet it. You step forward onto the darkening road, aware that another lesson waits, carried in whispers, rumours, and stories passed from one weary soldier to the next along medieval roads. The journey continues, and with it, the quiet, persistent presence of weapons shaping lives in subtle and profound ways. The road feels quieter after the horses. For much of the day, you continue walking beneath a grey sky, the image of those advancing lances still lingering in your mind. Even now, hours later, you can almost hear the rhythm of hooves crossing frozen ground. The dog seems unaffected. He has discovered a stick. This appears to be the greatest event of the entire journey. You suspect that if medieval kingdoms settled disputes through competitive stick carrying, history would look very different. By late afternoon, the road descends into a broad valley. Smoke rises from dozens of chimneys. A cluster of buildings appears beside a crossroads. An inn, a stable, a chapel, a blacksmith's forge, a handful of merchant wagons gathered near the road. Travellers come and go constantly here. Pilgrims, soldiers, messengers, traders, monks. The entire medieval world seems to pass through crossroads like this sooner or later. And where travellers gather, stories gather with them. You enter the alehouse just as evening settles across the valley. Warmth immediately wraps around you. After weeks of roads, fields, gatehouses, monasteries, villages, and walls, the familiar comforts feel almost luxurious. A roaring fire, beeswax candles, oak tables polished smooth by countless elbows, the smell of ale, bread, onions, and wood smoke. Wet cloaks hang near the hearth. The dog claims a position beside the warmest section of floor before anyone else notices it. A veteran move. Inside, the hall buzzes with conversation. Not loud, not rowdy, just steady. The comforting hum of people exchanging news. You settle near the fire. A serving woman places a wooden cup before you. Nearby, merchants discuss market tolls. Pilgrims compare roads. A monk complains gently about mud. Everyone agrees with him. Mud remains undefeated. Soon, your attention drifts toward a table occupied by soldiers. Not the same soldiers you have travelled with. Different faces, different accents, different cloaks. Yet the conversation sounds familiar. They are discussing weapons. More specifically, the weapons they fear, or claim to fear, or pretend not to fear, which, in practice, often amounts to the same thing. One soldier raises his cup. Crossbows. Another shakes his head. Pikes. A third immediately disagrees. Fire. The debate begins. You settle in comfortably. This promises to be educational and mildly entertaining. A merchant joins the discussion. Cannons. Several soldiers groan. Everything is cannons now. The merchant shrugs. They're loud. Fair point. The room laughs. The debate continues. One traveller insists arrows are worst because you rarely see them coming. Another claims maces deserve greater respect. A veteran from the north argues passionately for axes. A man from the coast insists ships bring entirely different nightmares. No one can quite agree, and that, strangely enough, becomes the lesson. Because as the evening deepens, you begin noticing something. The weapons themselves matter, but the stories surrounding them matter almost as much. Every weapon gathers rumours, exaggerations, legends, half-truths, misunderstandings. By the time tales travel across counties, they often become larger than life. A crossbow bolt that struck one knight becomes a story about 5. A single bombard becomes a weapon capable of destroying castles overnight. A skilled lancer becomes an unstoppable giant. Reality slowly wraps itself in folklore. The process feels almost inevitable. An elderly pilgrim joins the conversation. His cloak bears several faded pilgrim badges collected over many years. He warms his hands beside the fire, then speaks quietly. The weapon people fear most is usually the one they know least. The room grows thoughtful. A few nod. The old pilgrim continues, "When I was young, I feared eastern horsemen." He shrugs. "Then I met some—" Laughter follows. "And—" someone asks. They were mostly concerned about food, weather, and sore feet. The entire table erupts. The old pilgrim smiles. The point lands perfectly. Fear grows strongest in empty spaces, where knowledge is missing, where imagination takes control. Outside, wind rattles the shutters. Inside, the fire burns lower. The discussion drifts towards stranger tales, stories carried from distant roads. Some swear a certain sword once glowed during battle. Others claim a saint appeared above a battlefield and turned the arrows aside. One merchant insists he saw a cannonball bounce 3 times across a river. Another immediately accuses him of improving the story with every cup of ale. The merchant denies this. No one believes him. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Perhaps they never have. Perhaps they never will. Near the hearth sits an old woman spinning wool. She listens quietly, then finally speaks. "My husband feared sickness more than weapons." Silence follows. Not uncomfortable silence. Thoughtful silence. The old woman continues spinning. He spent 20 years worrying about battles. Her hands move steadily, and then survived them. The spindle turns. A fever nearly took him instead. Several people nod slowly. The medieval world understands this truth well. Weapons inspire fear, but so do winter illnesses, poor harvests, floods, fires, accidents. Life remains uncertain. Always. The spinning woman smiles gently. Fear chooses many disguises. The room grows quiet again. Outside, darkness fully settles across the valley. Inside, candles burn lower. The conversations soften. Some travellers prepare for sleep. Others continue speaking in hushed voices. You glance around the hall. The faces glow softly in firelight. Soldiers, pilgrims, merchants, monks, ordinary people, each carrying memories, each carrying worries, each carrying stories. And perhaps that is what truly survives, not the weapons themselves. Most rust eventually. Wood rots, iron corrodes, castles crumble, but stories travel onward. Across roads, across generations, across centuries, the dog snores softly beside the hearth. A surprisingly impressive achievement. A monk nearby appears mildly offended by the volume. No one else seems concerned. The fire settles into glowing embers. Outside, frost begins forming once more across the valley. Tomorrow your journey will finally reach its end. One final destination awaits. One final lesson. Not about a single weapon, but about everything you have learned along the road. The bells of a distant abbey ring through the darkness. Soft. Familiar. Comforting. You listen carefully, and somewhere between the fading conversations and the steady tolling of bells, you begin understanding that fear itself may have been the greatest companion of medieval soldiers, not because it defeated them, but because it walked beside them every day, just as faithfully as the little dog sleeping by the fire. The final morning arrives quietly. No dramatic sunrise greets you. No trumpets sound from distant towers. Instead, a pale silver dawn spreads gently across the valley while frost gathers upon fences, rooftops, and sleeping wagons. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin, wavering threads. Somewhere beyond the hills, a monastery bell marks the hour with the same patient certainty you have heard throughout this long journey. The dog wakes first, naturally. He stretches, circles twice, and looks at you with the expression of a creature entirely convinced that he personally organised the sunrise. You leave the Crossroads Inn and continue along the road. The countryside feels familiar now. Fields sleeping beneath winter frost. Bare trees standing against the pale sky. Roadside shrines weathered by rain and time. Farmers already beginning their work despite the cold. The rhythm of medieval life surrounds you once more. Steady, patient, enduring. By midday, you see your destination. A keep rises from a low hill ahead. Not the largest fortress you have seen. Not the grandest. Yet somehow it feels fitting. Stone walls catch the pale sunlight. Watchtowers overlook frozen fields. A banner moves lazily in the winter breeze. You climb the road toward its gates. Iron-bound oak doors stand open. Guards nod as travellers enter. The familiar smells greet you again. Wood smoke, hay, leather, cook fires. The scent of people living ordinary lives behind extraordinary walls. Inside the keep, activity continues as it always has. Servants carry baskets. Stable hands tend horses. A smith repairs hinges. Children chase one another through the courtyard. Life persists. Not despite weapons. Not because of weapons. Simply alongside them. The captain who has accompanied much of your journey walks beside you. Together you cross the courtyard. The dog follows. Still loyal. Still curious. Still convinced that every corner contains something worth investigating. Eventually you enter a long stone hall. The room is warm. Rushes cover the floor. Candles flicker along the walls. A fire glows within a broad hearth. Above it hang weapons collected across many years. Pikes, crossbows, maces, axes, polehammers, lances. Even a small hand cannon rests upon a wooden rack. The collection is impressive, yet strangely quiet. None of the weapons seem frightening here. Not hanging peacefully in warm firelight. Not surrounded by laughter from the kitchens and bells from the chapel. Not while snow drifts softly beyond the windows. The captain studies them, then speaks. Funny, isn't it? You wait. People fear these things. His eyes move along the wall, and rightly so. A pause follows. But they're only part of the story. The fire crackles softly. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, warmth settles through the hall. You sit beside the hearth. The captain joins you. For a while, neither of you speaks. The silence feels comfortable. Earned. Eventually he gestures toward the weapons. Every one of those frightened someone. You nod. The statement hardly requires debate. A pike frightened cavalry. A crossbow frightened knights. Fire frightened entire towns. Cannons frightened walls. Lances frightened infantry. Daggers frightened anyone standing too close. The list continues endlessly. Yet as you look around the keep, another thought emerges. Every weapon frightened someone. But every weapon also occupied only a small portion of life. The people living here worry about many other things. Harvests, weather, family, illness, rent, livestock, whether the roof leaks. whether the ale is drinkable, whether winter stores will last until spring, the concerns of ordinary people remain remarkably persistent. A servant carries fresh bread through the hall. Its warm scent fills the air. A boy chases a dog through the doorway. Not your dog, another dog. Apparently medieval society maintains a healthy dog population. The captain smiles. Most soldiers spend far more time waiting than fighting. You remember the roads, the monasteries, the market squares, the gatehouses, the villages, the countless quiet hours between stories. He is right. The weapons matter, yet the spaces between them matter more. The bells sound again, softly this time. Afternoon prayers. The familiar rhythm continues. You wander through the keep, past kitchens glowing with warmth, past storerooms filled with grain, past workshops where craftsmen repair tools, past a small chapel lit by candles. Life everywhere. Ordinary life. The thing all those feared weapons supposedly exist to protect, or threaten, depending on where one stands. By evening, snow blankets the courtyard. Torchlight glows against stone walls. The keep settles toward night. Travellers gather near the hearth. The fire burns steadily. Someone tells a story. Someone else disputes part of it. As always, those who tell the tale never fully agree. The disagreement feels comforting now. Human, familiar. You settle into a chair near the fire. The dog curls beside your boots. His eyes droop. Your own feel heavy as well. The journey's been long. The road's muddy. The night's cold. The lessons many. And slowly, very slowly, the pace of the world begins to soften. The conversations become quieter. The fire gentler. The candlelight warmer. The sounds of the keep fade into a peaceful murmur. You watch shadows dance along ancient stone walls. You listen to distant bells drifting through snowy darkness. You smell wood smoke, bread, and beeswax. And you think of everything you have seen. The pike standing like winter forests. The patient crossbowman. The whispering flight of arrows. The weight of maces. The bite of axes. The danger of fire. The leverage of pole hammers. The subtle menace of daggers. The falling stones from walls. The thunder of early cannon. The hidden caltrops beneath mud. The unstoppable advance of lances. The stories that surrounded them all. One by one, the memories drift past like snowflakes beyond the window. None demand attention now. None shout. None threaten. They simply pass quietly through your thoughts. Like travellers crossing an old road. The fire settles lower. The hall grows dimmer. Outside, snow continues falling across fields, forests, villages, monasteries, and roads. Across all the places you have visited. Across all the places you have imagined. The medieval world grows softer now. The sharp edges fade. The cold becomes gentle. The darkness becomes comforting. You hear only the crackle of embers, the occasional sigh of wind against stone, the faint ringing of distant bells, the steady breathing of sleeping travellers, and somewhere very close by, the contented snoring of a faithful dog who followed you through every mile of the journey. The candles burn lower. The shadows deepen. The keep settles fully into night, and as the warmth of the hearth wraps around you, the world beyond its glow seems farther away with every passing moment. The roads are quiet. The weapons are silent. The watchfires burn steadily. No one asks anything more of you. There is nowhere else you need to walk. Nothing left you need to carry. Only warmth. Only stillness. Only the gentle comfort of a winter night beneath ancient rafters, while snow drifts softly beyond the walls. The bells ring one final time, then fade. The fire glows red, then softer still, and little by little the medieval world slips peacefully into darkness. Now the night grows deeper. The hall is nearly silent except for the occasional settling of old timber and the quiet whisper of embers shifting within the hearth. The warmth around you feels steady and reassuring, a gentle shelter against the winter darkness beyond the stone walls. Outside, snow continues to fall. Not hurriedly, not dramatically, just softly, patiently, covering roads, fields, forests, villages, and distant monasteries beneath a smooth blanket of white. The watchmen upon the walls move slowly beneath torchlight. The horses sleep in their stables. The kitchens rest. The workshops stand empty. Even the bells seem content to remain silent for a little while. You breathe in the scent of wood smoke and warm bread lingering faintly in the air. The familiar smells of safety, of shelter, of home. The long road is behind you now. The muddy tracks, the cold mornings, the stories of feared weapons, the distant towers, the crowded inns, the monastery bells, the frozen fields, all of them settle gently into memory. The pikes no longer advance. The arrows no longer fall. The cannons no longer thunder. The lances no longer charge. Everything has become still. And in that stillness, you discover something simple. The medieval world was never only about weapons. It was also about hearth fires, shared meals, warm cloaks, patient bells, sleeping dogs, the quiet persistence of ordinary people living one day at a time beneath changing skies. The fire dims further. The shadows soften. The snow continues drifting beyond the windows, and as the last glow of the embers fades into the darkness, you can finally rest beside the warmth of the hearth, safe within ancient walls, while the long medieval night carries you gently towards sleep.